This video will show you how to replace the fuel pump sending unit on a Ford Edge. This will be located inside of your fuel tank. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now before we can start removing our fuel tank to gain access to our part, we have to remove fuel pressure from in the system. So I'm along the driver's side of the engine compartment. We can see our vehicle's battery and we can see our fuse panel. Let's remove the panel cover. It has a small locking tab on the side. I'm just squeezing that in. We should be able to lift this up and out of place. Now that I have it removed, we're going to remove the fuel pump relay. I have it marked in red. It's number 26 on the cover here. Now with that said, we need to locate that exact same relay inside of this fuse box. I've also marked this in red. Let's go ahead and remove that relay. Typically you can do this by hand. You could try using some pliers. Whichever way you do it, be extremely careful not to cause any damage. Once you do remove it, just a quick inspection. If you see any corrosion, it needs to be replaced. This looks fine, so I'm going to temporarily set it aside. Now at this point, I have to attempt to start the vehicle. What I'm aiming for here is for the vehicle to crank over several times, but it should not start. If it does start, it should want to stall right out. That means that we evacuated the fuel from in the system. After completing that, let's reinstall the relay into the same positioning as where we had removed it. Press that in as far as possible. Let's go ahead and protect this area, and then we'll continue on to our negative battery terminal next. As for this cover, it has two ears down along the back side. Those just roll right on over that mounting point. Slide this down to the fully locked position. Double check, make sure it's secure. As for the negative battery terminal, we're using a 10mm to loosen our mounting nut just enough that we can remove the terminal end from the battery post. Once you have that removed, set it aside so it's making no contact with the battery post. After doing that, we need to make our way towards where our fuel cap will be located. So I'm opening my fuel door. We'll go ahead and turn this cap counterclockwise, and we're going to dislodge it. I'm just going to go ahead and hang this aside. We want to leave this open so the fuel vapors can vent as we continue on. Now, of course, we are in a well-ventilated area throughout this entire process. Let's continue on by safely raising and supporting the rear of the vehicle. Now, from under the vehicle, we can see where our fuel tank is. On an all-wheel drive vehicle, you're going to find that you have a rear drive shaft and an exhaust that has to be removed so we can start the removal of the fuel tank. We have to make our way up along the top. A quick note about doing this job, you want to make sure you set your parking brake and have wheel chocks in front of and in back of each one of your wheels as necessary. Prior to removing our rear drive shaft from the rear yoke, I typically like to make a clear marking. When we get to the front, we would want to do the same. Let's start removing the drive shaft from the rear differential yoke. For this, you're going to find that you have 4 13mm headed mounting bolts to be removed. Keep in mind, once you do remove all of these, this could potentially come swinging down. I don't want you to get hurt. Typically for my first mounting bolt, I'll fully remove it. I'll give it a quick inspection, and then I just start it back in a couple threads. This will help prevent it from falling while we continue on. Just a couple light taps here should help break it free using a rubber mallet. Let's leave this in place. We'll continue forward. In the center area here at the carrier bearing, we can see that we have 2 15mm mounting nuts holding the carrier bearing bracket in place. Let's remove the pair. Let's make our way forward. Up along the front, let's make sure we make a clear marking here as well. For the front flange, we have 13mm headed mounting bolts. There's 4 of these holding this in place. Couple light taps over here. Let's finish the removal of that drive shaft. So I'm in the center here, I'm pressing up. I'm going to remove the hardware holding this in place. Just a quick inspection of that, we'll set it aside. Just a couple bushings, a couple washers. Should be able to start sliding this down. Now we will have to still hold this. Let's make our way to the rearward aspect so we can remove that, and then we can bring this down. So we're holding on in the center. Get this off of here. Let's remove that drive shaft. With that drive shaft out of the way, it's time to start removing our exhaust. Now for this, I typically like to start along the rear of the vehicle. You're going to find that you have several rubber mounts that have to be dislodged. So of course, I need to have some support under this area. I'm applying light pressure underneath my exhaust while I continue on with all of my rubber mounts. There will be one right out in the center on the rear here. Each one of your side mufflers will have one as well, and then we'll continue on forward. With support underneath that exhaust, I'm continuing on with a pry bar. I'm going to carefully start prying my rubber mounts off of my exhaust pipes. You can use some high temperature lubricant as necessary. This may help things slide out of place. There's one. Let's do the same for the other side of the vehicle. Now, as I continue making my way forward, this is approximately where our drive shaft carrier bearing was located. I need to make a quick note about this. Our exhaust is a welded exhaust. In some cases, you may find that you have flanges along the way that you could dislodge the rear of the exhaust from. Realistically, we only need to remove as much of the exhaust that's needed to be able to drop our fuel tank. Since I have a welded exhaust, I need to make my way all the way up to the front at the catalytic converters. So with that said, I'm going to continue on with my rubber mount here. Now I do have one that's about 1.5 feet further forward, but let's leave that one in place. Since, like I said, I have to make my way to the catalytic converters to dislodge the Y pipe, that's where I'm headed next. Now as for my mounting hardware, holding my exhaust pipes together, I always like to apply some heat to the hardware to help prevent it from breaking. 15mm. Let's pause here. We're making our way to the forward flange next. Same process. Let's make our way forward. I've already heated this mounting nut. So here's where we're going to want to have a helper. They're holding on to the rear mufflers for me. Up in this area where our flex pipe is, we have our last rubber mount. Now for this one, it can be fairly difficult to remove, so I'm going to hold onto the pipe using some pliers. The pliers are something I can pry up against. While I'm doing this, I can use my pry bar. We'll go directly up against that rubber, and we're going to attempt to remove it from its mounting point. Let's go ahead and remove that exhaust. Now that we have that out of the way, let's focus on the fuel tank itself. Now, we do not want to remove the hardware holding the fuel tank to the body. The first thing we want to do is dislodge anything that may be held to the fuel tank itself. We're going to have to lower this, and we can't lower down the cables. I'm going to start on one side here. We have our emergency brake cable into a bracket, 10 millimeter. Now, as I move towards the other side of the vehicle, we do still have our fuel line leading towards that fuel tank. Let's wait on that. We're continuing towards the center. We're going to dislodge our next emergency brake cable from its mounting point here. Way over. All the way on the far corner. Now we have plenty of slack up in this area here with our emergency brake cable. Before we start removing any of our mounting hardware or our fuel line, let's make our way towards the rearward portion of the tank next. So we're along the rear of the fuel tank now. On the driver's side, we can see that we have our electrical connector leading up towards our evap line. We have our fuel filler neck, and we also have our evap line leading onto the fuel tank itself. I'm going to start with my electrical wiring harness. I just want to dislodge it from the fuel tank. I'm prying it out of place. You can use a flat blade screwdriver if necessary. I'm using a trim tool. Now that I have that separated, we're going to start dislodging our evap line from the area. Now, as for our evap line here, we're going to start removing the plastic clip. This plastic clip has two small ears. The ears are on the outboard side. I need to grab onto those and carefully pry and press them out and away. After that, we should be able to remove the evap line from the fuel tank. I'm using an angled pick for this. You can see it starting to pull away. Now, of course, I don't want this to fall back into place, so I'm just going to hold it out of position. I don't need very much pressure, so I'm just using a small pocket screwdriver. Light pressure there. Let's get the next side. Just gonna try to pull this out of here. Feels like it's a little stuck. All right, there's that portion of the clip. Go ahead and set that aside. At this point, you should be able to slide this off of here. If you have a hard time sliding it, you could carefully pry. Just be careful not to cause any damage. A quick inspection of that, it looks good. Let's continue on with the fuel filler hose next. Now, as for the removal of this hose, it has a small clamp. We're going to have to loosen it just enough that we can pull the hose out of place. Typically, you do not have to fully loosen it till it comes apart. The clamp on mine is actually accessed from up inside this area, so I'm going to use my ratchet. I'll just reach up in here. We'll start loosening this. Just using a 1/4 inch socket for this. Now that I have that clamp loose enough, I'm continuing on with a hose pick. I need to break my hose free from that fuel tank so we can carefully start pulling it away. Just attempting to make my way around here. I can only get around so far typically. There we go. I do see movement. That is separated. Now that I have it separated, of course, a quick inspection. We want to make sure it's soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. If you see any cracking, you're going to want to replace this. We don't want a fuel leak. This looks good, so let's continue on. Now, while we're back here, this wiring harness needs to be disconnected as well. It goes up and above the rearward subframe. Now, this does have a locking tab right here. You could either try to press on it and pull it out of place. Sometimes it's hard to squeeze. I typically just use a small angled pick. I'll make my way along the far side, grab onto the locking ear on the inboard side. I'm pulling down, and now I should be able to slide this out of position. Once you have it disconnected, of course, a quick inspection for corrosion. If you see any, it needs to be taken care of. This looks fine, so let's continue on. After that electrical connector, we have our next electrical connector. This one's fairly simple, a locking tab up along the top. Just gonna squeeze it in, pull it out of place. This is looking good here. Before we go any further, we're going to apply support underneath our fuel tank. Now, of course, this fuel tank does go from one side of the vehicle to the other, so we need to make sure we support the entire thing. Now that I have support under here, I'm starting with the hardware holding the fuel tank to the body along the rearward side. As we make our way to the front, we have hardware there as well, but we do still have one fuel line that we'll have to disconnect. We'll get to that. Now we have our support underneath the fuel tank. We're along the back side here, close to where the rear differential is. We can see two pieces of 10mm hardware holding the fuel tank to this mounting bracket in the center. Let's remove the pair. That's good for in the center. Now we need to make our way towards each rearward corner. For each one of our rearward corner bolts, we're using a 13mm. There's that mounting bolt. Let's do the same to the other rearward corner. So now we're along the front. In the center, once again, we have two 10mm mounting bolts. Along each corner, a 13mm mounting bolt. But also up along the front, we have that fuel line to contend with. Let's start with our 10mm bolts in the center. There's one mounting bolt. Just a quick inspection, we'll set that aside. There's the second one. Both those bolts are out, so we're moving towards our forward corner mounting bolts. The process for one's the same for the other. Just go ahead and remove the pair. We have all hardware out of position, the fuel tank supported. Let's go ahead and start removing our line. For this, you can tell that we do have a connector for our fuel line here. It has a red locking tab. We need to carefully start dislodging this. Now for this, it actually has this small area right in here. Just using a small pocket screwdriver, I want to gently pry this apart. At this point, this is unlocked. We need to press in on this ear here and pull down on the opposite side and then gently start pressing it out and away. Just go ahead and squeeze on both sides here. See, that one's moving. Apply some pressure here. Same on the other side. With this pulled away, we need to make sure we have a collection receptacle under this area. We'll continue on disconnecting this line. We'll just drain that into our collection receptacle. Now at this point, we can carefully start lowering the fuel tank down, but we can only come down so far. As you look towards the rearward portion of the fuel tank, you can see that it does go up and over our rear differential flange. We'll start coming down just enough that we can slide the fuel tank forward and eventually continue on bringing it down. Now as we start coming down, let's just make sure we don't get bound up on anything, such as maybe the emergency brake cables or even a fuel line of some sort. Slow and steady wins the race. Now as I start bringing this down, I'm looking along the top. I can tell that I do not have anything connected. Let's bring this down further so we can gain access along the top of the tank. Now that we have this down in an area that we can gain access along the top of the fuel tank, let's make sure we clean any miscellaneous debris. We don't want anything making its way inside of the fuel system. For this, I'm just going to use some compressed air. Now we can start the removal of our fuel pump. For this, let's continue on with our fuel line first, and then we have our electrical connector. As for the fuel line, you're going to find that you have two locking tabs. You can see one up along the top here. I'm pressing it in. The second one's on the opposite side. You should be able to pivot this as necessary. As I'm pivoting it, I'm just squeezing in on both of those ears and I'm pulling this out of place. There could still be fuel in this line. It may come out this side or the other. After removing the line, let's continue on with our plastic locking tab. For this plastic locking tab, I'm using a small pocket screwdriver. I'm trying to get underneath the locking ear and gently pressing as it makes its way out and over. We should be able to slide this right off of the fuel pump, and now we can insert this into the line. As for the orientation of this, we essentially just want to make sure the locking ears are properly aligned with their corresponding ports and press it in. After an audible click, we just want to make sure it is properly secured. We will be reusing this line. For now, we can set it aside. For our electrical connector, you're going to find that you have a locking tab for this as well. You can either try to press it in by hand, or you can use a small pocket screwdriver, whatever's easiest for you. Once you have it pressed in, just go ahead and disconnect it. A quick inspection for corrosion, we're going to set that aside. It's time for our locking ring. As for this locking ring, we'll use some penetrant along each one of our locking ears. Now, once you have that in place, we'll continue on with a hammer and a brass punch. Whatever you use, you need to make sure it's not going to cause a spark. You could have fuel vapors in this area. Now I have my hammer and brass punch. Let's start turning this counterclockwise. Now, as you can tell, this did break free. We can continue on removing the lock ring and removing the fuel pump assembly. A quick inspection of this, you would want to clean it up. Make sure it's not rotted or weak. If it is, you want to replace it. A little rust is okay. For now, I'm going to set it aside. At this point, we'll take hold of the fuel pump. We're going to carefully start lifting it up and out of here. Keep in mind, there is fuel inside of the fuel tank. Now I can see fuel inside of my fuel pump sending unit here. Of course, we do want to try to divert as much of this as possible back into the fuel tank. You can see that we do have a fuel line that needs to be removed. Just gently tilt this. Now we have our fuel float. We can start removing the fuel line. Now, if you are looking at this fuel line, you can see that I do have a squeezable tab on one side. As I spin it, there's a second on the opposite side. So I'm just taking hold of each of them, I'm squeezing them towards each other and pulling it out of place. There's our line, a close inspection. We'll set this aside. We don't need it falling into the fuel tank where we'll have to reach inside to grab. And there it is, friend. Prior to installation of any part, let's make sure we clean and inspect the mounting area. Go ahead and remove the sealing ring. Typically, this will be attached to the fuel tank. It's sitting right inside of a groove. We'll just carefully pull this up and out of place. Just a quick inspection of this. Your brand new fuel pump sending unit should come with a new gasket, and that is what you would use. Continuing on, we're going to make sure we clean inside of the groove where our sealing ring would be. As I clean this out, I'm making sure that nothing falls inside of my fuel tank. I don't want any debris in here. Now, after I've cleaned that, we also want to make sure we inspect each and every one of our locking ears on the fuel tank itself. Now, I've seen it plenty of times where these will be rotted, weak, or damaged in some way. If that is the case, you need to replace the fuel tank. You do not want any fuel leaks or vapor leaks along the top of the fuel tank. Now, this does look good, so let's prepare for installation. As far as the installation, we're going to start with our sealing ring. We'll take this and slide it down into the groove along the top of the fuel tank. It should seat perfectly. Let's continue on with the installation here. We're going to bring our fuel pump assembly over to being in position and install our fuel line. We'll carefully get this down inside of the fuel tank, and then we can install our locking ring. Let's go ahead and start attaching that fuel line to our fuel pump. We're going to take this and we're pressing it on as far as possible. Now, after an audible click, I'm giving it a tug. I can see that it does slide, but it does not fall out of place. You do not want this coming loose. After that, let's continue on to installing our fuel level float. This is going to slide down inside this area. We're being careful not to cause any damage, just a light flex should do. As we start bringing this down, let's make sure we have it properly aligned. I'm pressing it in as far as possible here. We want to make sure it's seated flush all the way around. Now it's time for our locking ring. While I'm holding this down, I'm attempting to bring my locking ring into position. Now each one of those ears attached to the fuel tank needs to fit into its corresponding slot on that locking ring itself. I'm gently twisting this. I can only go so far, but as you can tell, it is holding it down for me. At this point, I'm going to continue on with my hammer and brass punch. We're tapping this clockwise until it's completely bottomed out on each one of the locking tabs. Just double check all the way around. This is completely seated. After we have that in place, let's continue on with our fuel line directly into this area here. Line it up, press it in, listen for a click from that. Double check, make sure it's secured. Now it's time for our electrical connector. As far as the electrical connector, we'll make sure we have it in the proper orientation, press it in. Audible click, a light tug, it's secure. Now, one last quick inspection along the top of the fuel tank and we can get this back over to the vehicle. Now, as we start bringing the fuel tank up, there's going to be a couple things to pay attention to. Along the front, we have emergency brake cables. We need to make sure we're not getting pinched. We don't want to damage these. Now, let's quickly look along the rearward side here. As you remember, during the removal process, when we were bringing down the fuel tank, it had to be up and over the rear differential. So when we bring this up, we need to make sure we go up high enough that we can slide it straight rearward and align our mounting hardware. Once again, paying attention for those cables along the front. So I'm going up and I can see where the tank is going to go up and above our rear differential here. We'll maneuver things around as necessary. Obviously, we want to be careful not to cause any damage or drop the tank. Before we continue bringing it up all the way, once again, just make sure the cables are not in an area where they're going to get damaged. We'll continue on bringing this straight up to the fully upright position. We need to make sure we align each one of our mounting bolt ports. Now we will leave this loose. We're going to continue on to starting in all pieces of hardware. We want to make sure everything's started in before we start tightening. We'll start with our mounting hardware along the front. In the center we have our 10mm headed mounting bolts. We just need to get them started in. After doing the center bolts, go ahead and install each one of the two outer corner bolts as well. Now, just do the same on the other side. We can make our way towards the rearward hardware. So along the rear, we have our 13mm headed bolts for each corner. Let's go ahead and get this one started in. Do the same for the other. Now I have both sides started in, so we're in the center for our 10mm mounting bolts. Now all hardware is started in, so we can go ahead and start snugging and torquing. I'm along the front here. We're going to make sure we bottom out each one of the bolts and then torque each of them to 18 foot-pounds. Let's get this far corner. Let's get these center bolts. Now at this point, we're going to torque each one of these mounting bolts to 18 foot-pounds. After you've torqued all hardware along the front, go to the rear and repeat this exact same process. Now that the fuel tank's fully torqued in place, let's continue on along the back side of the fuel tank here. We have our evap line. As you remember, we had removed our small plastic clip. Go ahead and slide that back into its original position. Once it's all the way locked in, press this onto the fuel tank as far as possible. So I've got my plastic clip here. You can see the ear. I'm just sliding it through the end. Press that all the way through. There we go. Needs to go through the far end. Okay. Let's start lining this up. We're going to press it in. We'll listen for an audible click from this. There we are. Now, of course, a light tug. It does move around, but it does not slide out of place. This is exactly what we're looking for. While we're in this area, let's reconnect our fuel filler hose. That's going to slide right onto this larger area here. Just line it up, press it on there as far as possible. We'll tighten the clamp. Make sure this thing's nice and tight. Okay, right there's bottomed out. We'll just take hold of that hose. We're going to attempt to pull it off of the fuel tank. That should not slide out of place. It must be secured. This looks good. Let's continue on to our electrical connector next. As for this electrical connector, we're going to line up the locking tab area. We're pressing it in. Listen for a click from that. There's our click. And it's secure. Now we have all of this attached. I'm just going to take this and I'm sliding it into the fuel tank. We want to make sure it's secured in place. Now it's time for our electrical connector that leads up and above the rear subframe. We've already checked for corrosion. This looks good. Let's go ahead and line it up, press it in. We'll listen for a click from this as well. There's our click, and it's secure. That will not come loose. Now as we make our way forward, let's just go ahead and remove support from under the fuel tank here. Now after removing that, we're along the front of the tank. Let's secure our fuel line. We're lining this up. Just go ahead and press that in. Now I heard an audible click, but we can't stop there. We're going to press our locking tab all the way through. And then we need to make sure we lock it in. This is going to prevent this line from coming loose on us. Once you do feel as though you have it attached, attempt to pull it out of position. This line would be under pressure. It needs to be secure. Time for the emergency brake cables. I'm over on the driver's side. Go ahead and start in this cable. We'll snug up our mounting bolts, make our way over towards the passenger side. It's time for the passenger cable. Make sure we have it properly aligned. This next one here. Last one as far as the parking brake cable is concerned, all the way on the far corner, passenger side. Prior to installing our vehicle exhaust, we like to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting areas. As far as the mounting areas I'm concerned with, we have our two catalytic converters, the rearward catalytic converter and the forward catalytic converter. Let's just make sure we clean up the mounting points and confirm that nothing's rotted, weak, or damaged. I'm just going to use some fine sandpaper, give it a light scuffing. Okay, the studs are in good condition. Now let's move along to the next flange. You can remove the gasket if necessary. I'm just going to go ahead and clean this down. Studs look good. The next thing we want to do is clean the actual exhaust pipe itself. Now we have our flange here, fine sandpaper, just a light scuffing. We want to make sure we have a good seal. Just a quick inspection of the flange. This looks like it's in good usable order. Make our way to the next flange. Smooth surface there as well. Now we can start placing the exhaust. This can be easiest with a second person. We're going to have them holding up the rear of the exhaust so we can focus along the front. As for the front here, I need to make sure that my flange goes over these mounting studs here. We can move things around as necessary. I have that in place. Let's start on our mounting hardware. For this one, you want to make sure that the flange is perfectly seated. We have our mounting nuts. Now that I have all pieces of hardware started on, I'm going to snug them and then torque them to 26 foot-pounds. As for this rearward flange, when you attempt to tighten it, you need to make sure you go from one side to the other and then back again. Repeating this process several times, we need to make sure we're as flush as possible. We don't want to fully tighten one side and have the other side loose. As we continue on down the exhaust with our rubber hangers, we'll use some lubricant inside of the port so we can easily slide it onto the metallic portion of the hanger, essentially the bracket side. Let's make our way rearward. Here we are. Now we're all the way along the rearward side of our rear subframe. Let's get this in place, and then we have the mounts along each one of our mufflers as well. Just above the muffler on each side. Line it up, press it on. There we go. Same on the other side. Okay, let's just double check, make sure that's secured. We can remove any support from under the exhaust. Now, prior to installing our drive shaft, let's make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area. We're going to start up along the front at our flange. Just going to use some fine sandpaper. We'll give this a light scuffing. You don't see any miscellaneous debris or damage. This looks good. Let's make our way rearward. Now we're in the center where our carrier bearing would be. Not much to see here. Just make sure nothing's rotted or weak. Back towards the rear differential next. Fine sandpaper. After cleaning all that, we'll pay attention to our drive shaft. You have the front and the rearward flange. Just go ahead and give those a light scuffing, just as we did before. Nothing's damaged there. I'll just do the same for the other part, and then we'll make our way up to the vehicle. Now it's time for installation of our drive shaft. As we bring this into position, this can be easiest if you had a second person holding onto the rear of the drive shaft. We're taking the front, we're going to start sliding it towards our flange. Now, while I have that up in that position, I like to start in a couple of my mounting bolts there to try to prevent that from falling. For each one of my mounting bolts, I've cleaned the threads and I like to use some blue thread locker. We are only starting these in. We do not need to fully tighten these at this point. Onto the carrier bearing. As we bring this up into position, we need to make sure we have it in the proper orientation. You're going to find if you have it backwards, it will not go into the proper positioning. Now that I have this in the proper position, it's time for our metal washers and our rubber bushing. As far as the washers, the larger diameter washer would be the one facing towards that mount. We have a bushing, and then we have a smaller diameter washer. Go ahead and press everything together here. We'll continue on with our mounting nut and then repeat the process for the other side. Now I've got my washers and my bushing. Everything's in the proper orientation here. Now this should hold everything together for us here. Let's make our way to the rear for the rearward hardware. Now as I start bringing up the drive shaft here towards our rear differential yoke, you may find you have to carefully spin the rear differential yoke to make it match up. We want to make sure that we align our original markings. Got that bolt started in. We'll just do the same to all others here. Now when it comes time to snugging and torquing each one of your flanges, whether it's from the rear or along the front, The torque will be 52 foot-pounds, and we want to do this in a crisscross manner. That's all pieces of hardware back here. We can make our way towards the front. We're going to torque the front flange to 52 foot-pounds as well. Then we're meeting in the center, 30 foot-pounds for each one of those center mounting nuts. So up along the front, same process, as I mentioned, crisscross manner. Now in the center at the carrier bearing, we're going to make sure we snug each one of our mounting nuts. The torque for these will be 30 foot-pounds. Double check to make sure that's properly secured in place. Now we can make our way out from under the vehicle. Let's go ahead and resecure our fuel cap, and then we can make our way into the hood. Under the hood, it's time to reconnect our negative battery terminal. We're just taking this, we're pressing it onto the battery post as far as possible, and tighten our 10mm headed mounting nut. Right there is bottomed out. We're taking it a tiny bit further, and of course, making sure we're properly secured in place. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. The next thing you need to do is attempt to start the vehicle. You may find that you have a long crank scenario. Essentially, it turns over several times before it eventually starts. Once you have the vehicle started, just go ahead and double check for leaks, close the hood, and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.